theater of the mind continued. A prepper's nightmare. We all knew there was going to be a food shortage. We all knew because the past food shortage accumulated no growth. And through this GMO technology, everybody was fearful. Became reality. Corn, beans, pumpkins, you name it. All of the food sources that grew in the ground or on trees were now genetically modified. The problem was they forgot about the bees. Those little creatures that scurry about, pollinating flowers. We took them for granted. We took them all for granted. Even rainfall could pollinate, but those bees were so important and yet so ignored. Dr. Shenley was a biologist working at the Cleveland Institute of Technology. And Shannon was his mate, as she was his confidant and best friend. I forget those names again because I'm rambling on, but it doesn't matter. The point is these bees were being ignored in their livelihoods of the beekeepers. Their job is to bring those hives to the farms. Bees don't hang out today like they did back in the day. One beekeeper, won't even go with names because I forget. Again, I'm rambling, so it doesn't really matter, this theater of the mind. But you have to imagine a stout young man, mid-20s, has about 25 beehives on the back of a flatbed truck. He has numbers written on each one of the hives, so he knows where to place them. Keeps a GPS drone, and it flies over the beehives, identifying each and every one of the hive numbers. Today he's in a pecan farm. Hundreds of acres of pecans, so he's got to order more hives. And the funny thing is, the chemical guy who was out there also watching the grounds with his drone, well, they had lunch one day and said, listen, guys, we need to find a way to not have the pesticides being sprayed while we're doing the pollination process. Oh my God, what a disaster that became. These two couldn't agree on anything. Days and days and days, the bees would return to their hive with all the honey. Well, not really honey, but the nectar from the trees that they had accumulated. If you didn't know anything about beehives, there's a queen, and the queen has the drones, and the queen has the workers. It's up to the queen to produce the offspring. Now, what you have to understand is, be inside of a hive. The little creatures are so interesting because they're individual, but yet they're all the same. Take that one for a grain of salt. The weather outside is always nice. There's a few days of rain and some heavy winds, but those little bees know exactly where to go back to. It's in their DNA, or it's in their DNA to go back and tell the rest of the hive where the beehives find their nectar. One day, the weather's very bad. A storm comes, a tornado shows up, and tears the hives apart, killing the hive. Day after day after day, the relentless bad weather is destroying the pecan farm and those so-desired hives. One can only imagine a disaster would occur because pecans just don't grow on trees. Mind the pun. It takes years and years for the trees to grow, and then the pecans have to grow on the tree and then ripen. But it takes the bees, the essential part, the tree. The tree knows somehow in nature to produce the flower that takes up it's the sexual transmission of the trees. The bees do their part. If you know anything about childhood biology, I hope you understand. But I'm not here to give you a botany or any kind of education about it. We're here to spin a story. And this story is about these two bees living in this one hive that was forgotten about. The storms went by and the number was wore off by the debris being rushed up against the box. So the hive sat there, unattended by, for weeks and weeks. The owner had moved on. The land owner had gone bankrupt and the land was sold in foreclosure. It sat there and sat there and sat there for years and years. Nobody would farm it again because the weather wasn't correct. But, oh yes, but the beehive, it still was there. The queen had gone many generations past. And these two little bees kept flying out every day. Here and there and here, looking for a tree to pollinate. As the early summer began to turn into fall, the two bees knew each other. And they knew through their motions each time they would return home to show the hive where the next tree was to pollinate. They would sit side by side at the edge of the hive box and look out and think nothing because they're bees. But I got you there. You thought there was going to become a romance between drone bees. No, this is more about finding the next tree to pollinate, to bring home the nectar, to make the honey, to keep the tree, keep the beehive alive and for another year. As you remember, they turned the nectar into honey, put the honey into these cubes and let them, or honeycombs as they say, and let them sit there until they're needed. The smaller the hive and the more combs you could make, the more successful the beehive becomes. Over the next few years, those two bees are gone. Their daily lives are not very long. But in honey, oh my goodness, they had made dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens, and it continued on. They would survive. What you have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, is when it's the final effort to keep a story going and nobody listens, it's time to stop those stories. Farewell, just like the two bees, never to be heard from again.